Finally, the knowledge of the Ancient Ones is mine!
Welcome back. This is Copper Mutant with another Mutant Crawl Classics video. In my last video, I explained why I wanted the Terra A.D. setting from the Mutant Crawl Classics RPG to be a region in my world instead of the entire world. In a nutshell, the main reason was that while I liked 99% of what is in the MCC rulebook, the proposed non-Earth global Stone Age setting, along with a multi-thousand-year gap since the Great Disaster, ran up against a lot of adventure ideas I had cultivated in my head for use with the game. These ideas were based on the less than 100% accurate assumption I had made before purchasing MCC that it would be similar to the 3rd edition Gamma world I was familiar with and be set on Earth a few centuries from now tops. My adventure ideas were those of very Earth locations that hadn't yet crumbled away into dust. Rather than go with a completely different setting of my own, or that of the American Survival Guide, which, on a side note, is quite different and unique in its own way, I wanted to keep the default Terra A.D. setting as part of my broader, nearer future Earth, so that I could also continue to enjoy the published adventure modules from Mutant Games. So, given that I wanted to keep the Stone Age setting in a larger world, I looked at how the game could be expanded upon, but while staying true to maximum fun MCC and DCC are known for, trying to keep any explanations as simple as possible and as compatible with vanilla MCC adventures as possible. With the exception of a couple of things such as keeping an eye out for mentions of thousands of years in modules and the rulebook itself, this all seemed possible. So, on to today's topic. The benefits of treating the default setting as a Stone Age region instead of the entire world are many. These extend beyond an urge for world building to satisfy my inner 14-year-old with his dog-eared copy of Gamma World's 3rd edition, and can include fish out of water settings and NPCs with different backgrounds and culture from the players. The idea of Stone Age seekers coming across totally different cultures is one that is very appealing to me. This sort of thing is often seen in post-apocalyptic B-movies such as the aforementioned You're a Warrior from the Future, and I look forward to seeing it in my games. I don't see it as having a major impact on the pre-written MCC adventures out there if such contact is limited, especially considering that ancient mazer pistols from a tech perspective are going to beat out a post-apocalyptic ninja wielding an iron naginata. And that leads to more available tech levels beyond ancient artifacts to run across. In a world of more possibilities, not every society would be locked into the Stone Age. Perhaps some locations outside the known world of the Terra A.D. region had leftover ancient facilities that made life easier, preserved some means of crafting items with higher tech levels. Perhaps even the barest of knowledge survived and was passed down to help a community build a crude walled fort led by a tyrannical, pure-strain human who pushes his slave-like population to smith weapons of iron, barrels, and wheeled carts just to have an edge over primitive neighboring tribes and mutated beasts roaming the land. I have some additional suggestions on how to make this work, but I'll share that in the future, because the MCC rulebook does not really explain the tech levels higher than Stone Age and lower than Ancient in any detail. New classes that make sense in a different regional setting, or with different tech levels. Perhaps a section of your world could have rebuilt post-apocalyptic vehicles running around as in Mad Max, but where a tyrannical offshoot of Plantians are capable of merging into those vehicles themselves. Remember Jace and the Wheeled Warriors? Or higher tech-level tribes who ride AI-dominated cyber dinosaurs, as in Dino Riders. Perhaps a variant of shamans exist outside the known world who are mutated and infested with nanites as part of a pact to allow them to be more focused on limited but powerful abilities of telekinesis and force blasts akin to Ariel from Thundar the Barbarian. preserved old world technology in other regions, perhaps due to a time dilation during cataclysmic events that ripped the fabric of space-time that could allow a lost valley of the dinosaurs, but a lost valley of the ancients we're building as an artifacts that, while scarred from time and disaster, look only a few decades old and are much more intact. Another way to approach the preserved old world tech is to have the time since the great disaster shrink dramatically again from what's proposed in the first few pages. But one more potential way to look at this, of course, with the ancients, is that the materials they use, and this is stated in the rule book, are more durable. This would not apply necessarily to things that look more along the lines of 21st century manufacturers. So just keep in mind that if there was a society of the ancients, would those ancients have also had things like a Nuka-Cola plant? Or would they have had something different? This is a bit of a conundrum, so you just have to sort that out and think it through. You wouldn't necessarily want a Starbucks, but perhaps some sort of retro-futuristic coffee shop would be more appropriate, considering the last society before the Great Cataclysm was the ancients. New archaic alignments. It only makes sense that different regions and areas would not be limited to choices such as the clan of the cog. Rather, in my expanded world approach, the clan of the cog and other archaic alignments from the MCC rulebook should be focused around the so-called Terra A.D. regional setting, with the potential for branching out. I think I might make an exception for such as the Holy Medicinal Order, I believe. I forget their name. Think of any city today and how there might be multiple gangs with their own agendas. This is how I can see the archaic alignments existing within the region of Terra A.D. Regional and powerful in their own sphere of influence, but not global. Consider, on the other hand, the indigenous tribes in pre-colonial Americas and overseas. The Pueblo Indians of modern-day New Mexico had a completely different culture than the Ainu in Japan or the Inuit, and likely zero knowledge of one another despite theories that they all have a common origin. Secret hand signs and gestures of the default archaic alignments would be similarly unlikely to grant safe passage anywhere far removed from the default land where clan of the cog tribes exist in the Terra A.D. as a region type of world. New A.I.s. This one is self-explanatory, but I wouldn't consider it necessarily influenced by the flavor of the region unless the A.I. itself has inspired the flavor of the region. Since the A.I. will predate any local culture, that could be possible. Potential for a total merge with another Goodman Games or third-party campaign setting, such as the America setting, which I mentioned previously, which is, again, a third-party setting in a strange North America. Consider what things you might want to tweak, rename, or remove with such a total merge. Perhaps you decide that the gods of America are better named as A.I.s to align better to MCC rules. Perhaps you replace the American Survival Guide's mutant class with the standard MCC mutant class so there is no confusion about which rulebook to use for mutations. Perhaps you add in the survival aspect of the America rulebook for extra flavor, regardless of the region your players end up in later. Where to start out? The size and location of the standard Terra A.D. as a region in your world is up to you. I like to think of it as existing in Central America, playing upon the image of lush jungles and the fact that water already surrounds much of it, which aligns to the vague map on the inlay of the rulebook. The map works perfectly as a blasted remnant of Central America, in my opinion. Having your characters start out in Terra A.D. and move north, you could easily introduce them to the America setting or any other setting that, including your own, that implies North America, if for no other reason than artwork like this. that shows a stop sign once used in the United States. Regarding other rulebooks and settings, I do think you should put reasonable guardrails on what you might decide to incorporate into your world, both thematically and for the sake of game balance, so the powers and abilities in the MCC rulebook do not become or seem too weak, or on the other hand, overpowered. While you might be a fan of The Walking Dead, your party of mutants with all of their amazing powers would probably make relatively quick work of a village of roaming, real-world type zombies. But on the flip side, you probably don't want your party of mutants going up against superheroes from outer space. Look at the covers of the Mutant Crawl Classics modules from Goodman Games. They nearly always show a wide variety of bizarre mutants in a group facing off against some larger threat. Sticking with this general theme, you might shock the players if, for example, you imply that the rest of the world is all pure strain humans. Instead, if you have an itch for that, I'd limit it to an adventure where, for example, your party that includes mutants find themselves in a small region where the gene police have succeeded in ridding the area of mutations and mutants, and have advanced well beyond Stone Age limitations, capable of manufacturing items and dwellings of around Tech Level 2. Challenges to consider and solutions. The more you get into world building, something realistic for the sake of verisimilitude, the more needless complication you can add to what ultimately should just be an enjoyable game backdrop. As I enjoy world building, I have to stop myself sometimes. I think that holds true especially for Mutant Crawl Classics, which in my humble opinion is never to be taken too seriously. After all, we're talking about a game that has crazy mutants fighting robots with wild powers. This is a game not meant to be a post-nuclear survival simulator held in a hyper-realistic setting. This is science fantasy fun. Keep it that way as much as possible, I say. That said, there are some things that pop into my mind about how you might deal with any questions that arise from having Terra AD be a setting within another world setting. Does each region have its own spoken language? I suggest you simply state that the Ancient Ones arrived upon and spread a shared common language to all corners of the world, and while other languages did and do exist in the world, the language of documentation and what is used by A.I.s for communication is the common language of the Ancients. For the sake of further simplicity, you could have the common tongue spoken in your world be a remnant of the Ancients' common, with only different accents and slang for each region, so your characters can travel freely without worrying too much about comprehending the local tongue. If Terra AD is primarily a lush jungle setting, then what of the other parts of the world? Keep in mind the starting occupation of your characters based on regional differences. The MCC rulebook has only two options, Hunter and Gatherer. While these seem simple, you could argue they cover a broad base. A hunter could be a fisherman if you have an island setting, and a gatherer could be gathering anything of local use, including firewood or even specific types of rocks. There are possibilities for roleplay, such as being skilled at climbing from gathering coconuts. For higher tech levels than 0, however, I created a table of 24 additional Tech 1 and Tech Level 2 appropriate occupations. I'll share those in a future video. If you want to incorporate entire settings such as the America setting and have that be another region in your world, consider how the settings differ in any important or fundamental ways, such as the rough timeline since the Great Disaster. The America setting suggests 100 years at most since the Great Disaster, although I could be getting that wrong. That should be roughly correct. And many pre-apocalypse items that resemble 20th century North America still exist. This is obviously a contradiction with the Terra AD setting as written. The American Survival Guide actually has a very well thought out explanation that could easily be used. Keep in mind this description would apply to your world as a whole, and I quote from page 240 of the American Survival Guide. Consider the strange and cosmic nature of the cataclysm that rocked this world. It opened up dimensional rifts, caused some vast areas to interchange with similar areas from alternate Earth, changed the laws of reality enough to allow magic to exist and run rampant, warping numerous species into new and hideous creatures. How much stranger is it that certain random items have not aged much, while others have corroded at a faster rate than they should have? For the sake of my own world setting, I would probably eliminate the reference to magic, since that opens up a Pandora's box, but otherwise the explanation is good. If the setting other than America has vary a little too much, for example, say they have dinosaurs, and have the players asking questions, just have that be the result of the aforementioned rifts with the laws of reality having been cracked wide open during the apocalypse. My only advice would be to stay away from making things too extreme when it comes to differences in regional settings, again due to concerns I mentioned before, such as power scaling or making the player classes of your characters weak or ill-suited to the different environment. The same of course goes in reverse if you start in one setting and flip to the MCC one, which is also another potential way to integrate the MCC world to end up there. The MCC rulebook does not describe the tech levels between the Stone Age and the high-tech ancient weapons several tech levels higher. In my opinion, they should have included some kind of description of possible tech levels to give an idea, but to be fair, it really isn't important if you go by the pure rules as written. Some modules, like Warlords of A.I.s, actually have lower tech weapons listed in between their covers, but all you really need to know is the tech level number to know if your character can use it or not. That said, I do have a video I mentioned lined up to discuss the Gamma World 3rd edition tech levels, which seem to more or less match what we already know of the MCC ones, conveniently enough. Pre-written MCC modules may not work well with whatever setting or region your players eventually find themselves in, since the default assumption is that Terra AD was the whole world. It would be tough for your tribal elders to call upon you to fight some threat if you're 1,000 miles away. So you might consider having a reason for the players to find their way back to their tribal home region. Imagine the reaction of their old tribe members when the former clan of the Cog members come home, wearing studded leather jackets and tricorn hats or wielding crude firearms with a trained cyber velociraptor. And that's all I had to share today. Just the idea of making Terra AD as a setting for an area, whether it be continent-sized or much smaller, and making a more unpredictable and varied world beyond. Until next time, this is Copper Mutant, signing out.